Welcome to part 2 of intentional creativity. In part 1, we covered creating space, and now I want to talk about what you can fill that space with, right? And so today we're going to talk about input. Much of creativity is made by associating disassociated ideas, mixing up concepts, putting a new spin on an old concept, chasing down curiosities, learning new things, empathizing with different perspectives, or in other words, remixing input. Without material to play with, we will draw blank. So the goal here is to input a lot of material, but not in a passive way that most of us commonly do. Binging all the seasons of The Office again is a very passive and inactive experience. Most of what we consume is considered programming. When we spend all of our waking hours in programmed time, it leaves us with very little material to work with. What we create becomes derivative of the shallow input that we've consumed. The type of input that we're looking for here is to be actively engaged with. It takes effort to consume and understand. It has depths to delve. It takes time and focus. It yields worthwhile results. What I'm talking about here is getting away from the current zeitgeist that everyone is consuming in a more active and engaging way. So these are some suggestions for some of your input time. And this entire idea is to be intentional about the type of material that you're doing. Now, this doesn't have to eliminate every type of entertainment or whatever. What I'm talking about is adding a little bit of this type of thing into your daily routine. So, some suggestions. Chase down your curiosity. Dive down and document rabbit holes. If you're ever curious about something, make sure that you chase that. Make sure that you reward your brain for showing and being curious. Curiosity is a huge indicator of things that will create the type of thinking that will lead towards more unique, original, and creative thoughts. Okay? Read books, articles, lectures, biographies, poems, short stories. If you can, do that physically. If you're doing that on a device, do it on a device that doesn't really have the internet. So doing that on a smartphone or an iPad, it's too tempting to be able to kind of go away from like the text itself. And so if you want to mark things up and things like that, that's fine. You can do that on a Kindle or a Nook or, on paper books or something, but read books. Study the scriptures or other ancient texts, but do it by topic. Make chains between passages, take notes, ask questions, make connections from different texts or within the text. Another one is consume old media, paintings, theories, histories, and with this, get pre-digital. This is one of the biggest things. Try to consume things that are prior to 1975. And the further back you get, the better. In fact, what you will find is that a lot of this stuff that was made kind of pre-digital or in the 50s or the 40s or the 20s is very boring. And it's because our attention spans and our ability to focus on things is being destroyed and eroded. And so you're actually gaining back cognitive ability that you've lost by being a consumer of current zeitgeist media. And so consuming old media, old paintings, old theories, old histories, old biographies, old poetry, those types of things that are not of our era will actually get you into some deeper waters, and you'll be able to regain some of that focus and some of those things that you've lost. Then reverse engineer these things, deconstruct them, analyze them through different lenses. Okay, speaking of reverse engineering inspirational work, this is more than watching or listening to it. Okay, what makes it good? What are the components? Why are they arranged that way? What isn't there? What principles are being followed and how? What rules are being broken? Deeply understand why something is good. In the reverse engineering of these types of things, what you're going to do is not just be a consumer of that thing, but you'll be a student of that thing. Try to understand what is going on. And what you're doing there is you are, again, teaching your brain what you want in your thinking. And so instead of being a consumer of something, you're going to become a creator of things. And to be a creator of things, you need to deeply understand the components of things that are good, things that work, and why they work, and reverse, and be able to speak intelligently at depth about what is working or not working about different things. Okay? Study natural patterns. When I say study natural patterns, I think this is a huge thing, that nature in and of itself is fascinating, but it's very mundane and boring. And so I saw this quote from John Muir talking about how he hates the word hike because he likes the word saunter. And a hike seems like very objective driven and aggressive. And he says when we are in nature, we should saunter through nature rather than hike through nature. And so when I say study patterns, I mean, look at the way things grow. Look at why things look a specific way. Why can we identify an oak tree from a pine tree? What is the pattern difference between a pine tree bark and an oak tree bark? Draw that pattern. Articulate your understanding of that pattern. Okay? Some other things you can do. Ask questions. Attempt to answer unanswerable questions. And then finally, here's a really good one. Build inspiration family trees. Now, inspiration family trees are really awesome. What they are is that you find something that you're inspired by, a creator, a thing, or whatever, right? Find something you like, find that creator, find their inspiration, and then find their inspiration, and then find their inspiration's inspiration, and you go back until, and it's what you're going to notice is that you're going to jump between 10 to 20 years between each one, right? For example, George Lucas was heavily influenced by pulp novels of the 30s, Buck Rogers comics, westerns, World War II dogfights, and Akira Kurosawa. Akira Kurosawa was influenced by Shakespeare, Greek mythology, samurai shogunate culture, and oil paintings. Okay, so your sci-fi story will be much more interesting if you pull inspiration from Yojimbo and Herodotus than if you write a thinly veiled knockoff of Luke Skywalker. So, in your input, get deep, get curious, get intentional with some of the things that you consume. And as you do this, what you are doing is going to give you the ability to make very unique things, because everyone else around you is going to be consuming what everyone else around you is consuming. They're all using the same ingredients. They're shallow ingredients. So the current zeitgeist and the current media environment, there is very little depth, right? And any depth that is there is actually pulling from deeper and older waters, right? And so if you can get out of the current zeitgeist and go to things that are not being consumed and deeply engage with them rather than just consuming them, engage with them and recreate them and break them apart and reverse engineer them, what you're doing is you are creating, and here's a dated reference, but I think it's relevant. You are creating little cards in your little card catalog library. Okay, and so every little piece that you deconstruct, everything that you learn, everything that you find, every stanza of poetry that you read, and then you go in and you break down the pattern and the rhyming structure and understand the symbolism of those things, and then relate that to something in the Quran or something in the Bible or something that was written by Shakespeare or something that was written by an African poet or something. Then what you're doing is you're putting these little card catalog entries into your library. And then when you need to draw from things, right, you're not drawing from the same stuff that everybody else is drawing from. You're drawing from a very deep and very wide and vast library that you have created by intentionally going through and engaging with your input in a way that is going to be more positive and less surface level, right? And so get deep, get curious, get intentional with the things that you consume. Not necessarily everything. You can still go enjoy stuff and go have fun and, whatever. You don't need to become like a Luddite, troglodyte, cave dwelling, unplugged kind of person. But I do think that if you spend some of your time doing this, I've seen over and over and over again, huge things. For some student examples here. So I had one student who said, I don't like science. And I thought, well, that's a weird thing to say out loud, right? What he meant was he was never really into it, in high school or whatever. It didn't do anything for him. but he likes Scorsese. So he did an inspiration family tree, starting with Scorsese, jumping back 20 years each time. He'd go read articles, biographies, quotes of things where these people were talking about their inspirations and things like that. And he eventually got to Isaac Newton, and he started reading a bunch of Isaac Newton. And as somebody who didn't really think that he was into science, he found Isaac Newton wrote a lot of really interesting things and said a lot of really good stuff, right? There was another student that was watching SpongeBob and realized that there's this thing in SpongeBob where they're celebrating Leif Erikson Day. And she's like, I don't know who Leif Erikson is. And so then she started looking up Leif Erikson, and she went down a curiosity rabbit hole where she spent an entire month just learning everything that she possibly could about Vikings. So much, in fact, that she is able to differentiate Icelandic Vikings from other types of Vikings, and Greenland Vikings from whatever. And so she went and got very deep into these types of things, and it became a very rich part of her life. Now she is a much more interesting creative because of having delved those depths. Another student in the class, he was able to go in and he started reading and studying and looking at a bunch of 18th century sketchbooks. Which then got him into kind of naturalist types things, and then got him into looking at like cartography techniques of ancient map makers and those types of things, and why and how they were doing different things. Now he's building a visual library that is much deeper and richer than if you're studying SpongeBob, right? And so you can use current things like SpongeBob or other things to jump and start jump generationally to get some more interesting things. But if you're intentional about your input, then you can use your input to do those things. You're going to get cognitive benefit by teaching your brain what you want from it. You want analysis, you want recall, you want deep thinking, right? And you want longer attention and a deeper attention. So you're not second screening these things. You're not third screening these things, right? You're studying them in a way that will bring things out of them. So that's what I've got for you in part 2. So part 1, create that space, spend some time disconnected from things and be very intentional with that. Do some of those breathing and visualization exercises. And with part 2, what you're going to do is you're going to get intentional about your input. Now we're going to move on to part 3 in the next video, where we talk about capture and what you should do and how you can do things with a sketchbook. And then we're going to move into play and finally execution. Thanks for jumping in on this. I would love to hear your experiences if you're doing this along with me. Leave those down in the comments. And if you want to go buy the thing that you saw me drawing while I was doing this, then you can go to coreykerr.com/store. If you want to make sure that you don't miss out on these episodes, make sure to get on the email newsletter at coreykerr.com/email. All right, go make stuff.